Divante presents eCommerce Talks, where industry experts share their insights about the ever-changing world of e-commerce. Today we'll be talking with Chief of Technology at Vue Storefront and Magento Master, Sander Mangel. Sander, thank you for joining me today. We're very excited, but I know you for a little bit, but I'm sure some people would like to know a little bit more about you. So why don't you start? I mean, you've been around for a while. So can you tell us a little bit more? How do you end up in the e-commerce world?
Right. So about 12 years ago, I got hired as a developer at an agency, and they were doing this thing called Magento, which I pretty much never heard of. And they told me like, you're going to be the lead on this department and get some books and start studying. So I had like 30 days to get into the whole Magento thing. Bought like 3 books, read them in the evenings, and then I started, like, hopefully unprepared, I might say. And I'll admit it, like the first couple of weeks were rough, but slowly it started to grow on me. I did e-commerce before that, mostly bespoke solutions, which means that everything is painful. Taxes, discounts, products, you name it. That's all. You have to build it yourself, right? And then you have this solution out there that pretty much seems to have it all. And if they didn't have it, there would be like a module for it on the ecosystem. So that was interesting, and I started to get more and more into e-commerce since it's a very dynamic way of working. Before that, I did a lot of websites where you have your contact form and maybe some job openings, but it's very static, right? And one of the things I love about e-commerce is the direct return on investment that this client is seeing. You fuck up and they will not have their income for an evening or something like that.
That's very true.
So that progressed, did a couple of years of development, started to get more into lead roles, doing consultancy at agencies, also freelance. Ended up at a merchant for 3.5 years, which was a very interesting experience as you're somewhat protected from the realities of business when you're on the agency side, right? I mean, if something goes wrong or if you have to do a new feature, there is an e-commerce manager on the other side, on the client side, that takes care of a lot of things. And then when you transition to a merchant side, you have to get down into the trenches, do like the negotiations with the finance department, with logistics on how we handle packages, that kind of stuff. So
literally, you've been basically from development all the way up to the salesman of the solution.
And that was interesting. It was a huge learning, and not on the technical side, but on the more soft skill side. How do you get people to buy into this kind of stuff? How do you explain X months of development on a feature that for them is like, I just want a button, on, that kind of request. So that was very interesting. And after that, I went to product. I got hired at Vue Storefront to help them push their product on the market, which is a headless front end for e-commerce.
Now, I introduced you to everybody watching this as a Magento Master. And even when I got introduced to you, my first question was like, what is a Magento Master? Is it like this guy like a Jedi of the Magento world? Or like, how do you become a Magento Master, or what actually means?
Yeah, it's a term that when you're not around the Magento space can come off as slightly odd. So Magento, in the form of Sherry Rhodey, she's the community manager at Magento, started this program about 3 or 4 years ago to recognize some of the more active community members, which entails either doing blogs or conferences or even just mentoring other developers. Now, I've been organizing together with someone else from the Netherlands, Me Magento, for a couple of years. Also an unconference, which is more a technical conference. I've done some online conference. It's kind of like an escalated hobby, you could say. So because of that, I got elected the Magento Master, one of the 22, 23
around
every
the world.
year. Yeah. So that's very, very cool.
That sounds very cool.
It's a bit of an honor. I'll say that.
I want to try to get in a little more, and I'm going to ask you that you get to see. Especially in this last conference, like what's happening with all this like ideas of microservices and and headless pieces of software that still, to me, I'm still trying to put my head around headless.
Right.
But how is it changing the environment? I mean, people used to have just one solution, basically host at their store or in the computer, where it's everything in one place. But now there's tons, if not thousands, of different solutions that you can just literally connect to, and I guess it saves you time. I don't know. How do you see this happening in the...
That's a good question. So I think headless has been around for ages. Basically, it means that you have an application, either online or offline, that does not have a graphical interface. In this case, that would be your average shop front end that we all know. So headless is becoming more and more popular, I think mainly because as technology is getting more and more complex and the whole ecosystem is maturing, you see that it becomes more and more important to choose the best of breed when it comes to any sort of technology. I think, for example, search is a very, very clear one, right? Where you would have your normal search, which would run on MySQL, a pretty standard database type, which a good example is like the typos that you do, right? I'm looking for shirts, but I type shards or shares or whatever, right? Now on Google, we're used that gets auto-completed into whatever you want to have, and on a lot of e-commerce stores, they don't. They'll just tell you, no, we don't have that, which is we can be. I mean, we're talking about conversion, so it's an important thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's get frustrated if you don't get what you want straight away.
Exactly.
You just don't go back. Don't go back to the store. Yeah.
So we have these solutions out there from some solutions as Algolia or Clevo or whatever is out there that specializes just in search, but they don't sell their software. You rent it. Right, they don't want to give up their IP, so they tell you, okay, install this plugin or piece of JavaScript, and it's talking to our services. So here you see already an introduction into service-oriented architecture where you are talking to an API, an abstracted interface that code can consume. We do the same for payments. Nobody's really handling credit cards on their own anymore in the bigger store, or maybe the bigger stores, but not the smaller stores. You give them off to a payment service provider, and that makes sure that it gets charged. Right? So why not do the same thing for your catalog or your checkout or even your pricing or stock keeping? You wanna invest in the best of breed technology that's out there. And the decision of making or buying is becoming more and more actually buying. And buying means a SaaS product. Everything is rented nowadays, right? You don't really buy software anymore. And that's a big change for the e-commerce platforms out there, especially the ones like Magento or a bit more down-market WooCommerce. They traditionally have been an monolithic application made out of all these modules that you download from the internet that might or might not be of high quality, that might or might not be actually leaking some private information. I mean, nobody knows. And that's becoming less and less. And I think it's a trend that will continue for at least for the foreseeable future.
And I mean, you've been in both sides. You said you were a developer, and you also been on the front side, literally representing the brand. How do you see the perception from the client side? Are they willing to give away their monolithic idea of having everything, or control of everything, into just hooking up from smaller bits here and there? Is it something that people is more into it, or they're still not very ready to go?
It depends a lot on the merchant. Like the more traditional ones want to own stuff, right? They are the ones that might even buy cars for their company instead of leasing them, that kind of stuff, right? They want to have this piece of software on their server that they can go in and touch to the I mean, they want to be able to move it around and almost feel
it's the ownership feeling,
right?
Yeah.
And then you have I would say a new generation of merchants that doesn't really care about it anymore. They are used to renting stuff, right? They use Airbnb, they use bike sharing, they use whatever you have out there, and they're also used to just renting a search engine. And it's perfect because you don't have to take care of the maintenance, you don't have to take care of upgrades. it just works, and it works really well. You just need to take into account that you're paying X amount of money every month to have that. So it's definitely something that the newer generation seems to be embracing. Also, some bigger companies are more and more investing in that kind of a solution, because they see that long-term investments for IT are hard to make, right? We have a general life cycle of about 5 years, I would say. After that, you refresh your whatever backend you have. So why not go with a solution that works on multiple platforms and that can adapt to the multiple business strategies that you might have? Because who knows where you're going to be at in 5 or 10 years.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, but you're right. I mean, the new generations are very in touch of what it means to not own a software, just rent software or use a service. Now, I am from a pre-digital generation, so I was raised with brick and mortar and moving to the digital world. So I mean, it sounds great and it makes a lot of sense. Now, does anything you see that there might be a con versus having your own hosted system?
I think there are. So when you think of it, these companies that seem to be big, that seem to have been around for ages, might very well be one guy in an attic who is very good at marketing, right? So you don't really know who you're dealing with. We have seen some data breaches over the last couple of years that not only financial data but also personal data. That I'm not saying that I can do it better when I host on-premise the security, but at least I'm a smaller target, right? I'm less visible. So that would be a downside. Also, there is a sense of ownership that is lacking when it comes to SaaS. At the end of the day, you might be renting a SaaS, but you're still implementing it. And when something happens, you're still responsible for it. And it's hard to explain to your end customer that's clicking away on your web shop, sorry, the search is not working just because this guy,
you cannot really say, like, sorry, not my fault. You know what I mean?
He's on holiday, he didn't know how to restart the server, and so we don't have any search. So it's hard to take ownership of that, and it takes a different kind of investment that is almost a form of insurance, I would say, right? Maybe have a backup system, maybe have a DevOps that can take care of certain hosting aspects for that. That I think newer web shops might not be used to dealing in that way. So we're in the midst of I would say a revolution in the way we're dealing with this right now, which means that we might not have got up to all the details of this new way of dealing with e-commerce.
Now, I mean, for Magento, obviously, is a change of paradigm. I mean, Magento used to offer everything at once. So, like, here you go, right?
Yeah.
So with this whole wave, I mean, how is Magento turning, or how is Magento adapting to this new paradigm?
Right. So Magento saw the same thing happening, right? And they have been going at cloud hosting for a while with mixed success. Some might remember the Go period, where they offered Magento hosted solutions for Magento 1. Now they are back with another Magento cloud offering, but it's always a very monolithic cloud offering. Basically, they're hosting a shop on Amazon, and that's it. More recently, they have become aware of this issue and are gearing their architecture towards more service-oriented offerings. So they promoted a new director of commerce architecture, Igor Mignola, and he will start to transform that whole architecture into actual services. So what we might call a module now will be an independent service that might still act a part in a monolithic setup, but can be replaced by an outsourced search engine or a hosted SaaS solution
and
for your catalog.
Perfectly adapt to Magento. Okay.
And Magento also sees some benefit there when it comes to revenue, right? Because now they're just giving you a big SaaS solution that costs, let's say, $30,000 a year. Well, they might go after even smaller or bigger merchants when they have this, let's say, menu where you can pick from, okay, I'll just have very basic search. It'll cost me $500 a month.
But then you can customize it, right?
Exactly, but then I want to have stock keeping, which has to be like state of the art, can do everything. Maybe something like in B2B, right? You don't really need powerful search, maybe in some B2B, because you just want this or that tie rip. But stock keeping is so important in B2B. So they might offer you a very expensive and very advanced B2B stock keeping platform.
All right. So I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, companies need to evolve into. It's evolve or die in the world. So I mean, and together with that, we hear rumors about Magento 3. So we heard this evolving step that. I mean, I didn't want to surprise you with that question, but I mean, there's nobody better to ask right. what you think about this next steps.
Well, I think Magento 3 is something that will not happen for a couple of years, but what will be Magento 2.5, 2.6 should be Magento 3 probably. They are gonna change a lot of stuff. And basically whenever you would change the whole architecture to cater to a new kind of requirement, it should be 3. I don't think they'll go that way just because people are scared of upgrading, right?
So it will be like PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5.
Right,
it will make a difference.
Exactly. It will make a lot of difference, but also in the requirements, right? The way you host stuff now will be much more complicated. You won't be able to just get your regular server from some VPS farm and put some Magento on it. You'll have to have a cluster that runs Docker images that host I don't know what kind of a service. So it's definitely a shift there, and also in IT teams and that kind of stuff. We'll see different disciplines coming in to support that.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to that. Now, I want to switch a little bit the conversation, not too far though, but I wanted to ask you about Shopware 6.
Right.
Because I mean, it is the open source is there, but what are the benefits to work with something like that?
So Shopware has been around for ages, I think. It's not as old as Magento, I'd say, but like it's getting there. It has been a closed source system for a long time, and more recently they've been starting to open source. And they got onto this whole service-oriented architecture pretty early, and that's Shopware 6 basically. So it is built as a headless system. They do offer a simple front end that you can slap on it. They also teamed up with Vue Storefront to have a dedicated PWA-enabled headless front end on it. But they very much focus on the back end. That's what they're good at. That's what they understand. They want to do that. So you see already that they have this service isolation where it's easy to replace certain components. They have a very comprehensive API coverage. They have APIs that not just only get and set data, but actually perform actions, right? And that's a big difference, where if you think of creating an order, you have to have products, you have to have an address, you have to have a shipping method. But all these things are not simply set, right? Because the shipping method might be dependent on the kind of products that you have. So you don't want just APIs that set data for you. You want to have APIs that encapsulate business logic.
Yeah. And
I think that's
to your product.
Right, and that's what they're doing very well there. So it has been in, I think they call it alpha right now. We should see a release candidate end of the year, and it's something I'm very much looking forward to. I'm already spinning it up at home to play around with it a little bit.
Okay, Sander. Let's say I'm a big player. I have tons of money. I'm ready to go to the e-commerce world.
Already your best friend.
I know. Well, that will be the first thing, right? But I have a very decent budget, and I'm ready to go. But I still have no clue of what to do. So, what will be the first step beyond the money? What will be the first step for me to set up a proper e-commerce platform?
Right. So one of the first questions I would ask is, are you going to go national or international? That's a big one, right? Because you have to deal with language, especially in Europe. Mm-hmm. It's language, it's currency, it's even between Germany and Austria, which are two German-speaking countries, there's a lot of difference. Maybe Switzerland is even a better example, where you have still differences in the language.
French, Italian, and German, and all in one.
Totally different, way of shipping goods. So you want to choose a platform that can support that. Now, for example, Magento would be a good solution for that. Also, Hybris or Demand, where you have a couple of solutions out there that might fit that. Another question that will be very important to ask is what kind of integrations are you doing? Now you're a bigger player. You'll already have Salesforce in place. You might already have Pimcore in place or Acneo for your product management. You have a warehouse or maybe even more than one through Europe. So there's a lot of implementation coming from that. Now running Salesforce, you might want to go for Hybris by default because they tell you that it comes with it. But it's still good to do your due diligence and really look at the various options out there, and especially the cost of ownership. So whatever budget you have, take 1/3 of it, put it in the bank, and keep it for the first year. Especially when you're going to head out to new markets, you're going to need that money to do your marketing, keep the shop running, right? You're not going to turn a profit on this new market right away. So you want to have a buffer. And you don't want to blow all your budget and have management coming after you because you still have to improve stuff after launch. You're going to deal with things that you didn't foresee yet. Translations is an important part there. So whenever you have to republish some products or whatever, you need to get translations, you need to get artwork, that kind of stuff. That's very expensive. So there you have your budget, right? It's about 2/3 of what you should have available to you, and then we can start to decide on the platform that is best.
Now, usually, I mean, and I've seen it a lot here, especially here in Europe. A lot of successful companies, they start with no team, no technical team. It keep growing, and the technical team comes later. So,
right.
I'm a CEO of a successful company with all this money. I could go two ways. I can try to hire a whole team for my company to manage all this, or I can literally just give this to someone else to do it for me. How do you see that as a well-spent money, or what are the pros and cons of choosing one or the other?
That's an interesting question. And this is my opinion, right? But I think that if you're a C-level executive with very little affinity for technology, you are going to have a lot of trust in your CTO to do the right thing. And otherwise, there's going to be a lot of frustration because you might not be aware of what the IT team is actually doing. Because IT is a lot of times, we're working on this upgrade and it takes ages and you can't really see any end result from it because the front end is still the same. What am I paying for, right?
Yeah.
Well, at agencies, you kind of pay what you get for, or you get what you pay for, the way you want to see it. But they keep you more in the loop of, okay, we're working on this and we're doing a workshop. And I'm not saying it's cheaper. It might even be more expensive because they're used to entertain the client. At least, keep him engaged.
Throw a couple of buzzwords and he'll be like,
exactly.
Okay, they're working.
A lot of PowerPoint slides there. But it's a company that, you feel more in control because you're paying the money and they are supposed to do what you want them to do. So I think it's for C-level, it's something that they have to be comfortable with one way or the other. I've been in situations where I was part of an IT team where C-level might not have been fully aware of what we were doing, and thus question the value of what was going on there. And whenever you need more resource, they will be like, okay, but are you going to deliver more? Not per se, we just need to invest in this, right? So it's there are different situations, and I don't think there's one definitive answer to that.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. Now, let's say we have companies that they're completely settled, right? I don't know, imagine Zappos or Zalando or companies like that. The environment is moving very fast, and a lot of companies tend to chill and not do anything. So for companies that they're established already, what should be they looking at, or what will be the steps that they're going to evolve into something that they better be prepared?
Right, interesting. So you mentioned Zalando. They actually started out on Magento, and I think they switched too late because they at some point had a Magento version that definitely wasn't upgradable anymore, and they switched out into this service-oriented architecture. I think they're one of the few companies that are doing microservices the right way, at least from the outside. It looks like it. And what you see there is that they have the momentum and they have the size of the IT team that enables you to drive innovation, right? In a lot of companies, we see that the IT team is very reactive. Logistics want a new warehouse. Okay, we'll implement a new WMS. We'll hook it up to the system, and then we move on to the next project because it's already waiting. Well, in Zalando and in some other companies, you get this almost incubator where an engineer might try a different technology on the weekend. He becomes passionate about it. He starts to advocate it on the work floor, and all of a sudden you see a small team popping up. I think Zalando calls them guilds, and basically if they have 2 or 3 people that are interested in technology, they allow them to investigate this and to start investing time in this. And I think that is what defines these companies as it drives them forward.
So companies definitely need to invest in innovation. Otherwise,
right. So one of the benefits of hiring a solution provider like a bigger agency is they should be able to do this on their own, right? They have developers that do their hobby projects and then get the room on the Friday afternoon. I think that's a famous one.
The
right?
hackathons and stuff.
The hackathons where they can just try out any new technology, and that's where a lot of interesting projects come from. So Vue Storefront, what I worked for, was actually a project for one client, and one of the lead developers on that invested heavily on the technology, on PWA, what it stands for, the benefits we have from it, and he basically created this whole product around it, and now it's something that we sell separately, right? Which is a pretty amazing journey, if you ask me. But that's one of those clear instances where investing in technology can lead to a beautiful solution that now enables merchants with less budget to still have a PWA enabled web shop.
That's it's evolve or die. That's what I always think is companies. I mean, I met tons of data scientists from Zalando, which when the first time I heard, like, you guys sell shoes. Where is data science? But obviously, it makes a lot of sense when you think about like all the innovation behind the company and why they are where they are.
Yeah,
well,
I think in general, a good way to know what kind of technology you should be investing in is to look at other platforms that your target audience is investing in time in, let's say it, and then look at the issues that you might have. So, for example, why PWA is for me one of the hot up-and-coming technologies for e-commerce is people are starting to get used to the more offline experience. It should be snappy, right? Spotify has it, Instagram has it. So when they go to on your e-commerce shop, it feels clunky.
Yeah,
and
they expect
right?
the same speed,
and it
right?
should be snappy. Well, we see a lot of B2B customers that tell us, okay, we're out in rural areas, we're out at trade shows, and the Wi-Fi is crap. I mean, you've been to conferences, they have, for some reason, they always have like one dial-up connection for 500 attendees, right?
566 is always
exactly. So, and the guys out there selling products, pushing their services, they have this iPad with them, and then they're like, we have this new project. And it's loading.
You have to wait a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. You're gonna
love it.
You're gonna love it, right? And now with PWA, we're able to cache that offline just before they go into the conference. They have all the images, they have all the prices there, and they're gonna be like, yeah, this is fast, right? You love this new tractor or whatever. I don't know.
But I guess that's one of the things that this whole microservices environment is creating is innovation. Is let's have something people want. But at the same time, it pushes people to want things faster.
Actually, that's spot on. I think the whole service-oriented architecture enables you to adapt technologies faster. So there is a bigger investment upfront where you have to what they call, there's more orchestration, right? How do you take control of deploying a certain application, or how do you do the logging in the monolithic environment? It's a bit easier to do it, or it feels easier maybe. When you go into services and they come with Docker and Kubernetes as hosting solutions, there is a bit more tech involved in general. But once you have that right, it's so easy to start swapping out parts. I've worked for a merchant, and it was time to switch to a different fulfillment solution because there were more warehouses and that kind of stuff. And what we did was simply build a new application with the same APIs, backwards compatible, then add some new features for the new warehouse that the other systems didn't need to know of, and just swapped it out in one go, and nobody noticed it even. And that for me felt so powerful, because normally you would go into the system, start to swap out modules, right? You had feature flags, like if it's this country, use this. It's time and money. So painful, right? Yeah, and what you see with a lot of companies expanding into more international territory, let's say you're a web shop from Germany, right? You might be looking at the Netherlands, which is a fairly big market, so it's safe to put down a new instance of, I don't know, Magento or Hybris. But maybe going to, let's say, Greece, which you have a couple of customers from, you don't know why, but let's give it a try. You might actually want to plop down some Shopify there just to try it out. You don't want to invest too much money, right? You just want to have a fairly simple solution for that. Now you're gonna plop down this very simple solution and then have your service-oriented backend that handles like fulfillment or payments that you can hook up to it. And I think that is very interesting, that you're exposing your business logic to the outside with some logging in, I would suggest, but you're making it much more democratic. You're enabling other smaller platforms to use it while not having to invest big time in setting up this whole infrastructure.
Because I mean, beyond small companies, beyond settled companies, everybody's thinking of global expansion. I mean, not everything is everywhere, right? And it's part of your plan. I mean, you want to be everywhere.
Exactly.
But I mean, definitely is a good step to take. Instead of investing all of your budget in, all right, we're all over the world, but we're selling still in the same places, is to test, like the smaller services that allows you to test different. Right.
And even when it comes to a re-platforming later on, right, you're now in, let's say, 10 countries, and you started 15 years ago in Germany on some IBM WebSphere instance that is huge, right? And then in other countries, you weren't able to put that down because it's simply too expensive. So you have Magento, and in other countries you have, WooCommerce or Shopify because you're just exploring that. Now, when you want to start either moving it all to one platform, or you want to start re-platforming some of the stuff there, it's comfortable to have the option to do it one country after another. Because if you have to do a big bang, let alone the technical implications of that, which is daunting, you also have the soft side, right? The people have to be trained with a new system, which is a challenge. I've been through that, and I've done the trainings, and these are people that are not used to working with different systems, so it's scary for them. You have to make sure that your whole logistics is catered to or is integrated into this new solution. So having the comfort of taking this step by step, that's something very, very valuable, I think.
Yeah, and I'm sure, I mean, not only for CTOs, but also, I mean, what they report to the CEOs is like, we're not going to blow our budget. Take it easy. We're doing everything step by step. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and even being able to go to your colleagues and say, okay, so you're doing logistics, don't worry. You can still use, I don't know, whatever obscure fulfillment company you're using in that country, because we're just going to switch over this country now, and then go on to the next one.
Totally. Okay, Sander. One of the things I wanted to ask you is what happened to not only Magento, but the Demonware and Hybris. They're all being bought by big companies. I mean, when Adobe bought Magento, I was like, why? A company that I associate with graphic design, right? To me, it's Photoshop. Right. Why are they all these companies are getting involved in e-commerce?
I think when you look at the landscape so we're talking here about bigger clients, right? We're talking here about clients that don't shy away from a €100,000 license or even more. When you look at those companies, they tend to invest in one provider. So I'm a big brand company, right? I already use Photoshop, and then I needed something to store my images. So I needed DAM. Adobe had me covered. And then I needed to start sending emails, and they had a solution for that. And so it evolves into Adobe does this mainly through acquiring. They buy a company that fits with the needs of their clients, and in this case for Adobe it's coming from the branding perspective, and e-commerce was one of their last things on the checklist basically. So now they can go to a company and say, hey, come with us, you'll have your Photoshop, you'll have your experience manager, which takes care of
also have your shop,
billboards and that kind of stuff. Exactly, and you can also sell now online with Magento, and so basically Magento had the open source edition, which was free, and then they had like 2 or 3 tiers in the paid edition, and then people in Europe were even already complaining that was getting kind of like expensive, and then Adobe comes in and they're like, that's cute, but it's not expensive enough. And they take Magento, right? They leave Magento there, but they take the Magento cloud offering, they slap it onto their Experience Manager cloud, and all of a sudden you have this integrate. And I mean, it's amazing, right? Because you're designing a banner that you need in 15 languages, and once you publish, it'll be on the shop, it'll be on billboards, on the highway, and that kind of stuff. So it's like, for a big company, it makes sense. A very big company. Now, when you look at SAP or
Salesforce, right?
Or Salesforce, they are coming to this more from like the CRM ERP side, right? So they already have these clients that are managing their stock and their people and their orders in a system, right, in their ERP system, and now they want to be able to tell you, hey, you actually just buy our Salesforce system and you have a storefront as well. So it makes a lot of sense to offer these huge systems, let's say. And I mean, it's expensive, but it makes sense from an IT point of view to have one provider for this.
Do you think it will scare smaller solutions or smaller companies to go and compete with these like behemoths? I mean, we're talking about Salesforce, right? I mean,
right.
Adobe.
Yeah. So one of the arguments I heard, especially at this Imagine, at the Adobe Summit where I was as well, it's the Imagine for Adobe, let's say it, which is even bigger, like 15,000 people. And then a lot of the smaller agencies now involved with Magento, but also back in the day with Demandware, we're saying, okay, we have this down, we can build web shops. We're not able to compete in this whole ecosystem because all of a sudden you have to have experience manager developers. Now, these guys are making double the amount of money that a Magento developer would make, and it comes with this whole marketing department that you also have to have with it. So for smaller agencies, it's becoming more and more of a challenge to actually offer this kind of stuff. And we're happy that Magento keeps on offering their smaller packages, but once that goes away, these agencies will need to move over to a new system.
I completely agree with that. I mean, but at the same time, do you think maybe we'll eventually open up more doors? Because imagine all these companies, they're bringing the price up, they're bringing all the solutions in one place, so you don't have any choices. Maybe smaller companies are going to, hey, we're here, we're cheaper, and we do the same. I mean, it could help in a way. Aren't you agree?
There are definitely opportunities, and I think for the bigger players under us, let's say 50 employees and up, right? The bigger agencies, they can definitely get into this. In general, I don't really believe myself in getting everything from one provider. As I said before, I believe in best of breed, which means you might want to shop around for different solutions. On the other hand, I've been in a position where I had to manage all these relationships and licensing, and it would take 2 weeks to renew everything, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and you hear it a lot where, for example, I think Microsoft Office is a very good example of that, where because it was so fragmented, companies would pay double or triple the license just because they weren't aware of who was using what and what was going on and what was actually out there. So from an IT managerial point of view, it makes a lot of sense to go with the one-stop solution. But then integrations between these behemoths might not be the best, right? Because they have an active interest in making it harder to integrate, I don't know, Demandware with Adobe Experience Manager.
Yeah.
So you are very much isolated in whatever market you end up in, and you'll have to deal with whatever they are selling you. Because having Demandware and not going for Salesforce all of a sudden feels very
Like
awkward.
cheating. Yeah, you're like,
yeah,
oh,
you get
dude.
really, I'm sorry, I like the license, but I like
But
it
I like
better.
the other one. But at the same time, I guess it's a level of trust. I mean, people trust in companies that they're open and transparent.
True. Yeah.
So you don't want a company to tell you can do things. So like Magento has the opportunity for, sure, bring in other modules from other companies. We're fine with that.
Yeah, and this is also these companies are the the saying like no one ever got fired for choosing IBM. Like those kind of like, if you're gonna implement Salesforce, sure it's expensive, sure you need to hire consultants for $200 an hour, but by God it will work, right? Maybe not, but like C-level will have their reports and they're happy. So I think that it's a safe choice for a lot of companies, right? If you are an e-commerce manager working for, I think they had like the North Face as a client, like, and you have to choose a certain e-commerce solution, you'll go with Magento because,
I guess it'll give you peace of mind. I mean, especially if you're a big company, you don't want to have to deal with many
Adobe
things.
is saying it's good, so it must be good, right?
Exactly.
Because I love their Photoshop filters.
Exactly. I mean, Adobe has the trust from the world already with the product. So
I think here it's much more a case of big companies not knowing per se what to choose and then going for the safe bet. And I think that's what goes on in a lot of companies. And there, I mean, you can still make that kind of choice, right? If you read up on what's out there, if you talk to consultants, other merchants, that kind of stuff, you can still make that choice in a safe manner. But you should be informed of what you're getting into.
That's true. Sander, well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for being in the show today. Where can people find you next? I mean, I know you're basically in every Magento event. So where can they find out where you're going to be?
Right. So I'm not going to list all of the conferences I am at. I would suggest people to go to Twitter, follow me there, /Sander Mangel. I post there a lot of the events I'm going to, some articles I'm working on, and in general what keeps me busy. So that's a good place to connect with me.
Cool. We're probably going to put Twitter here, or if the editor hates me, he's going to put it here. I don't know. Well, thank you one more time again, and thank you everybody for watching. Next time, please don't miss the show because we're going on the road. We'll be in Berlin very soon. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sander, again.
Thank you for having me.
See you next time.